Raining confetti in Houston, the maize and blue color, as Michigan wins the national championship. They do it doing what they do best, running the football, a college football playoff record, as they go for 303 yards rushing. A couple of big runs early on set the tone for the day, and as the confetti fell, every piece of confetti telling its own little story, says Jim Harbaugh. Michigan wins the national championship, their first since 1997. Welcome into the show live. We are 228 days away from week 0 of the college football season. 228 as we get ready to count down to the next kickoff. But here's Michigan, the long journey of Jim Harbaugh bringing Michigan back to dominance, and it finally happened.
Well, look, it was a dominant performance, and I think what you've got to say now, a lot of people discounted Michigan because they were playing in the Big Ten and they weren't playing powerful offenses, but I think it's pretty evident now that Michigan is the best team in college football. And, the tables have turned on us a little bit. We used to get really bad semifinals. Now we get good semifinals, and we get bad championship games. And much like last year where the national championship was won in the semifinals between Ohio State and Georgia, that happened in the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
I think, the same thing. If Alabama beats Michigan, they probably go on and beat Washington. Penix was just off.
Yeah, I clearly the best team came out of the Rose Bowl, whether it was Alabama or Michigan. I think either team would have beaten Washington, and that was Penix's worst performance. You're right. I don't know if it was defensive related, if it was pressure related, if it was, he got hit a lot, if there might have been a hidden injury there.
Great defense, and I see what Dunaway's about to jump in. But
that pressure.
All of that put together, I think, played a role.
Odunze, when he was wide open on the 4th and 7 at 17-3, I don't know how he missed
That's
it.
a walk-in.
He had to throw it because of the pressure. He's having to.
Well, he's throwing it on the run. Yeah, he was throwing it on the run, and he just never got his feet set.
I get it, but it was an awful throw.
No, it's an awful throw, and that's a throw he makes in a regular season game. I think the pressure had something to do with it, too.
Yeah.
I don't think he was, he was ready for that stage quite yet.
I don't know, man. He made those
experienced.
throws under pressure last week against Texas.
Oh, he did, because he didn't have the same pressure that on him as the guy was under distress all night long, and they did it with 4 men rushing. Unlike when they played Alabama, they had to bring that 5th guy all the time, and Alabama's receivers just weren't good enough to get open in the time that Milroe had. Last night, 4 people rushing. They were able to create that pressure, which allowed them to play zone to help cover up the great Washington receivers. If they'd had to bring that 5th guy all night long, I think Washington would have won the football game. Those front 4 for Michigan dictated that game, and that was what was the difference. In my opinion.
I'm just saying, going back
to
to last week, he saw this pressure, and he made amazing throws where receivers were covered. I'm just saying there were some open shots last night. Look, I didn't enjoy the game. I had Michigan and under at lanceslog.com. We were 3-0 last night, which was great. But, it wasn't a fun game to watch.
Because one of your plays was Corum rush yards, right? That thing was over early, wasn't it?
Well, you go for...
Well, Donovan Edwards took a lot of them.
Well, he took 2 of my carries, but you go for 229 in the first quarter, averaging over 19 yards per carry, and then you basically go away from it.
I couldn't believe that.
I thought the key moment was going to be when they're up 17-3 with about 4:46, I think, in the second half. They're on the 38. They call the timeout. They couldn't decide whether or not to punt. I agree, go for it in that situation, but you got to run the football. 4th and 2.5, and they throw the football. Then Penix takes them right down. They score on 4th down at 17-10,
and you're
getting the ball.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, what have they done? They've let them back in this game.
My brother and my dad and I have a group text that goes in any game. It goes through all the football season. Any game that we know we're all watching, we're group texting about, right? And when that game started the way it started, the whole group text was like, this is going to be a bloodbath. Like, Washington has no answer for, and I even at one point said, you might have seen McCarthy throw his last pass in the first quarter. Jim Harbaugh will not go away from the run. This guy is stubborn. He will run it all night.
Well,
and then he went away from the run.
Brock Heward yesterday, Washington grad, was like, I'm afraid they might come out and run it 15 straight times.
I don't know why they didn't.
Should have.
I don't know why they went away from the run. They were dominating with the run.
Now,
game.
I will give them credit in the second half. They did adjust to the run.
Well, I thought they did it in the second quarter where they held them to 35 yards. They were forcing them to throw the ball a little bit with the way they were stacking the box. But unbelievable game for Michigan. Let's get some reaction and then talk more about the game. Brown's going to get your comments over in the chat room, so you can be part of the show today, as we always like to include you. Rockstar, let's go cut 3 first. It's quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who don't call him a game manager because most people still project him as a first-round draft pick, right?
Oh, yeah. And the kid, I mean, say what you want. He had to make some throws against Alabama. We talked about that one throw on the goal line against Ohio State. He made one of those throws last night to Roman Wilson. Was unbelievable. I mean, so he's got great accuracy in spots. You see his upside. The scramble was huge, too.
He threw a couple that were spot-on hard throws right on the money that got
dropped. Yeah.
There were more drops in that game
But
last
how big
night.
was that scramble for him on third down?
It was
and
tremendous.
He showed his speed right up the gut.
Coming off the goal line, too. I mean, they were pinned down.
Yeah, this guy played great football. The numbers, like a lot of great quarterbacks in championship games, won't blow you away. But he did what he had to do for his team to win the game, and J.J. McCarthy sort of sums up being national champions.
We came a long way, but in order to accomplish things like this, you got to go to those, dark places where everything's not great. And, just the response, the urgency right after that last game last year, it was different. I knew it, just from being on the podium last year and saying that we'll be back. I knew the guys that were coming back, and I had this feeling that it was going to be where we are right now. And, just all credit goes to, the players on this team, everybody in that facility, Coach Harbaugh. Like, that man, he's the reason we're here today. So just all thanks to him and to everybody on the team.
Thanks be to Harbaugh. According to J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, about a year ago at a home basketball game at Michigan, walked out. They gave him the microphone, and he announced he was coming back to school, and he was coming back to win the national championship. 1 year later, both McCarthy and Corum make good on their promise.
This seems like one of those deals, almost like your Bucks going all in with Tom Brady, the Rams going all in with Stafford. This was like a true build for the last 4 or 5 years with Harbaugh, and keeping all of these guys engaged, keeping them all in the program. They all bought in. Michigan's going to have a drop-off next year. They probably lose 2-3 games in the regular season. But it was all about this year. And so I give them a ton of credit. They all did buy in, and Blake Corum, it's a fun guy to watch.
You see it sometimes in the NFL. Team will go to the playoffs, they get bumped, and then they go deeper in the playoffs, and then finally they make the Super Bowl, right? It's like it's a progression. You don't see it a ton in college football that way. Because most of the time you graduate a set of players or they go to the NFL and you kind of have to retool, and then you're back in the playoffs at some point. Michigan did it. You made a good statement. It was a build. It was like, they got to the playoffs the first time, didn't really look like they belonged, right? They come back to the playoffs, weird game against TCU, still will never figure that one out.
Yeah, they were the better team, but
didn't play that way. But they lose the game, but it is right down to the wire, much closer. And then they finally have their championship team. Felt like a pro sports progression, not a college sports progression.
Normally when you see a team 3 consecutive years in the college football playoff, and we had 4 teams, it was your Alabamas, your Clemsons, your Ohio States, your Georgias, teams that were going nowhere. Like next year, maybe Michigan sneaks in a 12-team playoff.
Maybe. Yeah.
But I think they're different than these brand programs we've had for a while.
All right, so Washington, couple of early times in the red zone, really goal to goal, especially on that first trip down when they had to settle for a field goal. They've got the greatest wide receivers in college football. They got Michael Penix Jr., and they run the ball. They run the ball, they kick a field goal. And the next time they're down there, they run the ball, then they finally pass on third down. Man, what are you doing?
Yeah, I didn't get that. Dillon Johnson has been a difference maker over the last 6 weeks of the season, and he's one of those guys that can at least take a little pressure off of Penix. But when you get in the red zone, and Brock Ewart pointed this out, he said the difference is going to be Washington in the red zone. If they can convert touchdowns instead of field goals, they can win this game. And I think if they would have gotten some of those early, probably different game.
Yeah, and especially that first trip down there, because Michigan has just gone right down the field on you, and you look like you had no answers.
Yep.
And you go back down the field, and you have to invest 2 timeouts into that drive, and you only get 3 out of it. That's a killer.
But your point, still a good-looking drive coming out.
Yeah, it was a good drive.
Did, right?
If I'm investing 2 timeouts in a drive in the first quarter, I better get 7 out of it, not 3.
Well, I'll tell you, when they went down, I was like, damn, because I had Michigan in the under. And I was like, we're about to have a track.
It did kind of look like a shootout.
Yeah. I mean, that was you're against the wall answer after Michigan took it from their own 15, right? Yeah. It wasn't just a drive. It was a drive.
And ran it down
It
your
was
throat.
A man drive, yeah. And then Washington was answering. I was like, you guys, I was like, okay, this is about to be a game.
I thought the same thing. We may have a little shootout here.
Yeah.
How is Washington moving the ball like this on Michigan's defense? Alabama couldn't do it. Nobody else they played hardly could do it. And Washington all of a sudden is moving the ball. And you invest 2 timeouts and you only get 3 out of it. And then Michigan takes it right back down the field on you. I'm like, okay, it's not going to be the game I thought it was going to be.
Felt better. I know it sounded weird with how explosive this Washington offense has been, but I thought Michigan would play from behind better than Washington. Because, once Michigan gets that lead, the anaconda.
Yeah, when it was 14-3, that's what I thought. I thought, here comes the anaconda.
But the whole time that we sat there, wasn't it 20-13 for all the third quarter?
Yeah.
That whole third quarter, 20-13, I kept sitting there going, well, eventually they're going to connect over the top.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, Herbstreit brought that up too.
Yeah.
He's like, one of these guys is going to make a big play, and I think it was the very next play where they missed on.
That was what was crazy.
No, it was a holding. Because he hit Odonzi.
Holding.
Yeah, he gets called back.
And it was just kind of a hook hold.
But he hooked him first and got him off balance, and then he gave him a little shove.
Yeah, they
to
turned
the
him
ground.
in slam. He basically turned him in slam.
Yeah, that was the problem. A little extension of the arm and then the push.
But
if he hadn't done the push, if he just hooked him, he'd gotten away with it.
And that was a big play.
It was.
Yeah, what was wild is that Michigan left the door open for them, and they just refused to ever kick it in.
For a whole quarter.
For a whole quarter. I mean, Michigan was so vulnerable right there, and Washington just refused to ever do anything with it.
Yeah, I agree. On the other side, let's hear it from Michael Penix Jr., cut number 4. The guy was gutsy. I don't know if it was a rib injury, pulled muscle in his stomach, but he was in pain.
Yeah.
You could see him occasionally wipe tears from his eyes.
I
that
know
much pain.
Some athletes play it up a little bit. He's not one of those kind of guys. So I would assume this morning he's a little sore.
I will tell you, coming into the season, I was down on Washington. I can't remember where I had him in our preseason top 25. I just didn't think he could put together 2 good seasons back-to-back. He exceeded expectations, could have easily won the Heisman Trophy. Michael Penix Jr. here after Washington comes up 1 game short.
They're a good team. We just didn't execute it in the moments we needed to. Yeah, man. It was just about executing, man. I don't feel like they did anything that I feel like we beat ourselves, and it was times we definitely had opportunities to make big-time plays, to make this game a lot different, but it just come down to executing. They're a good team, but we had a lot of opportunities.
And they really did. You go back to the 2 Donovan Edwards runs, which, by the way, out of nowhere comes Donovan Edwards. 41 and 46-yard touchdown runs. He had 4 carries for 11 yards against Alabama. Not a really big part of the game plan.
No, not at all.
He had 4 more carries than me and Brown combined in Pasadena. Didn't really contribute a lot. And then he comes out, and both of those were just run fit problems that they didn't. Well, they were not in their run gaps. They didn't defend it correctly and opened up a lane for a guy to get easy scores.
Well, I thought the first run where he actually gets caught up inside, you got to be able to make that tackle because then he bounces it back out. It was a great effort from Donovan Edwards, but, man, you saw the speed. And, that was the thing. People always, the entire season, were like, I just don't think Michigan's got the speed to keep up with these teams. And, boy, Michigan's got a lot of speed.
Does Donovan Edwards have abnormally large thigh pads or abnormally large thighs?
I think thighs.
I think he's a Hugh Freeze recruit. He got them small ankles and massive thighs. He's got a weird build to him.
If you go back and you look at the greats, not that Donovan Edwards is going to be a great, but he had a great night last night on a big stage. But he looked like, from the waist down, the way Ricky Williams used to look, the way Earl Campbell used to look.
Big old thighs, man. Massive.
Yeah, really good there. Michael Penix Jr., by the way, his first multiple interception game since September of 2022.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't throw 2 interceptions.
No.
He had 2 last night. 1 was late. He had to force it a little bit. But there were other dropped opportunities in that contest.
Yeah, kind of a weird game. Michigan doesn't commit penalties. They average 2.5 per game. They had 5 last night and some pretty big ones. And then on the other side, Penix doesn't make mistakes, and he made, the critical one really was coming out second half.
Yeah, because, you had a chance, and I focus on this maybe too much, but especially in the NFL, I think it's big. Your back-to-back possessions, right? You had a chance if you're Washington to have the dreaded, or whatever you want to call it, back-to-back. You scored. I think there was 40 seconds left. Michigan didn't have any timeouts left after that. and you score right before the half, and you got a chance at 17-10. You got a chance to go back-to-back and make it a 17-17 game. It's now all of a sudden we're at 0-0, and you throw a pick coming right out of the locker room.
Yeah, it was. It looked like the first play McCarthy threw in Pasadena. It almost,
that's right, yeah.
It almost was identical to what happened, except the Michigan guy didn't step out of bounds, and you get that big interception, which ended that momentum a little bit there. Forrester is telling me that I had Washington at 21 in our preseason ranking. Brown, you had him at 18.
Heck yeah.
LT had him at 11. So LT was the closer there. Forrester, I don't know if you have those pulled up. You don't have to show them, but can you give me any information on where the three of us had Michigan in the rankings? Here we go. This is
who's that?
Jim Dunaway. So I had Michigan just missing the 4-team playoff.
Oh, well, you're close.
Yeah, I got two of the playoff teams correctly. Who's next? Seemed like we had somebody pick Michigan to win it all, didn't we? Ryan Brown had Michigan also fifth, and he got one of the playoff teams. Well, you thought USC's defense was going to be better.
I did, yeah. That's a bad call by me.
Yeah. LSU 6. I think the next
I thought LSU's defense could be better.
Yeah. You were not good in defense.
No, I could not peg the defenses, could I?
All right. And here's Lance. LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. You got one as well. Michigan 8th.
Yeah, we did.
Well, it's funny because after LSU lost that game is when I jumped on the Michigan bandwagon pretty much all season.
Yeah. You're right.
I can't believe I had them that deep down.
Yeah. Graphic don't lie.
No, LSU Georgia national championship.
Boy, when I look
that
back,
was close.
which was worse, LSU 1 or UTSA at 14?
Well, UTSA again. If Frank Harris doesn't get hurt,
I know. I'm just kidding with you.